The discovery came on a Monday morning in April 2023, when curator Sarah Reynolds was cataloguing artifacts in the basement storage of the Portland Museum of Natural History. Behind a row of neglected display cases, she found a weathered cardboard box sealed with duct tape. Inside, 7 mini DV tapes, a notebook with water-damaged pages, and a student ID card belonging to Marcus Whitley, a 22-year-old anthropology student who had vanished without a trace nearly 14 years earlier. The tapes and their contents would reopen one of Oregon's most perplexing missing persons cases, a disappearance that had gone cold despite extensive searches, media coverage, and the tireless efforts of a dedicated detective who never gave up. Marcus Whitley was last seen on November 12, 2009. Security footage from the museum showed him entering at 3:42 p.m., wearing a grey jacket and carrying a backpack with recording equipment. He signed the visitor log, noting his intention to gather audio for a research project on acoustic properties of prehistoric artifacts. The security cameras captured him moving through the main hall, but no footage existed of him leaving the building. "We had an older system back then," explains James Garrison, head of security at the museum since 2005. "Not all areas were covered by cameras. There were at least 3 exits he could have used that wouldn't have been recorded." The investigation began when Marcus's roommate, Tyler Chen, reported him missing after he failed to return to their shared apartment for 2 consecutive nights. "It wasn't like him at all," Chen told police. "Marcus was methodical, organized. He always told me where he was going and when he'd be back." Detective Eleanor Mercer was assigned to the case. Her initial investigation revealed a promising student with no history of mental health issues, substance abuse, or financial problems. Marcus maintained close relationships with his parents in Seattle and had been dating the same girlfriend, Alyssa Torres, for 3 years. His bank accounts showed no unusual activity, and his passport remained in his desk drawer. Everything pointed to someone who was settled, focused on his studies, and planning for the future. Detective Mercer notes in her case files. There were no red flags, no indications he wanted to disappear. The museum became the focal point of the investigation. Staff and visitors from November 12th were interviewed. Security footage was analyzed frame by frame. Every room, exhibit, and maintenance area was searched, including ventilation systems and the network of utility tunnels beneath the building. Police dogs detected Marcus's scent in the Paleolithic artifacts section and near a staff-only door leading to the archives, but the trail ended there. It was as if he vanished into thin air, recalls former museum director Dr. Lawrence Keller. "We cooperated fully with the police, even closed for 3 days to allow for a complete search. Nothing made sense about it." Marcus's laptop, recovered from his apartment, contained research notes about acoustic anomalies in ancient ceremonial chambers and the possibility that certain artifacts might possess unique resonance properties. His browser history showed searches for infrasound in prehistoric cultures, acoustic archaeology, and resonance patterns in carved objects. His thesis advisor, Dr. Elena Vasquez, described his research as innovative but firmly grounded in scientific methodology. Marcus was exploring how ancient peoples might have used sound in rituals, but from a strictly anthropological perspective, Dr. Vasquez stated in her police interview. He was measuring acoustic properties, documenting resonance patterns, nothing esoteric or fringe about it. As weeks turned into months, the investigation stalled. Marcus's face appeared on local news segments, then on missing persons websites and social media campaigns. His parents, Robert and Linda Whitley, offered a $50,000 reward for information. Tips came in, alleged sightings in Seattle, Portland, even as far as San Diego, but none led anywhere substantial. 1 year after the disappearance, the case was officially classified as cold, though Detective Mercer continued to revisit it periodically. Some cases get under your skin, she would later explain. Something about Marcus Whitley's disappearance never felt resolved to me. The discovery of the tapes in 2023 changed everything. Forensic technicians cleaned and digitized the fragile recordings, revealing hours of footage documenting Marcus's research. The first 6 tapes showed him methodically testing various artifacts with specialized audio equipment, recording their resonant frequencies and making detailed notes. He appeared focused, professional, occasionally excited when detecting unusual acoustic properties. The 7th tape was different. The timestamp indicated it was recorded on November 12, 2009, the day Marcus disappeared. The footage began normally, with Marcus setting up his equipment in a poorly lit storage room filled with artifacts not on public display. He was testing a collection of small stone figures from an unidentified indigenous culture of the Pacific Northwest. This is Test Series 14, focusing on artifacts recently acquired from the Callaway estate, Marcus narrates on the tape. These items haven't been properly catalogued yet, but preliminary research suggests they were ceremonial objects used in sound-based rituals. The footage continues for 23 minutes as Marcus tests each figure, measuring its resonant frequency. Then comes a moment that caused investigators to re-watch the sequence multiple times. Marcus stops suddenly, head tilted, listening. He whispers, "That's odd," before moving toward a large wooden cabinet at the back of the room. The camera follows, showing him opening the cabinet to reveal a stone chest with unusual markings. "This isn't on the inventory," he says, excitement audible in his voice. "Looks like it might be pre-Columbian, but these markings don't match any indigenous language I'm familiar with." The next 12 minutes show Marcus examining the chest, photographing the symbols, and attempting to open its sealed lid. When he finally succeeds, the camera angle prevents viewers from seeing the contents. Marcus's expression changes to one of confusion, then intense concentration. "That's not possible," he says quietly. "The acoustic signature is... I've never seen readings like this." The final moments of the recording are the most puzzling. Marcus places a small microphone near the open chest and connects it to his laptop. As he studies the screen, his expression shifts from scientific curiosity to visible concern. He quickly disconnects his equipment and begins packing up, moving with sudden urgency. "I need to get this to Dr. Vasquez immediately," he says to the camera. "Something's not right about..." The recording ends abruptly, mid-sentence. The discovery of the tapes prompted a reopening of the case. Detective Mercer, now a senior investigator, assembled a new team to revisit every aspect of the disappearance with the benefit of the new evidence and advanced forensic techniques unavailable in 2009. The water-damaged notebook found with the tapes provided additional clues. Though many pages were illegible, forensic document specialists were able to recover portions of Marcus's notes, including references to unexpected resonance patterns and potential acoustic anomalies in the artifacts he was studying. Most significantly, a partial map of the museum's basement level was recovered, with a section marked "Restricted Access" circled in red ink. Next to it, in Marcus's handwriting, "Check with maintenance about sealed room, possible source of interference in readings." This led investigators to Kevin Dobson, a former maintenance worker who had been employed at the museum in 2009 but had never been interviewed during the original investigation. Dobson revealed the existence of a small room adjacent to the archives that had been sealed off due to water damage and mold concerns. "Yeah, we called it the pit," Dobson explained. "Old storage space from when the building was a warehouse back in the 1920s. There was a leak in the foundation, always damp down there. Management decided to seal it up instead of fixing it properly. Budget cuts, you know." When asked if he had ever encountered Marcus Whitley, Dobson's response changed the direction of the investigation entirely. The student with the recording equipment, Yeah, I remember him. He was asking about that sealed room, said his instruments were picking up some kind of acoustic anomaly from behind the wall. I told him it was off limits, but he seemed really interested. Asked if there was another way to access it. Ground-penetrating radar confirmed the existence of the sealed space. When forensic teams broke through the wall in May 2023, they discovered a narrow room with severe water damage and extensive mold growth. More importantly, they found Marcus Whitley's backpack containing his wallet, keys, and the specialized audio equipment mentioned in his research. Most significantly, a section of the concrete floor had been disturbed and incompletely repaired. Beneath this area, excavation revealed a maintenance tunnel not included in the building's official blueprints, a remnant from the original warehouse construction that had been forgotten over decades of renovations. The tunnel extended beyond the museum grounds, eventually connecting to the city's old storm drain system. At the point where the tunnel met the drainage network, investigators discovered fragments of clothing matching what Marcus had been wearing on the day of his disappearance, along with his broken glasses and a damaged digital recorder. Forensic analysis of the recorder recovered partial audio of Marcus's voice. Following the signal, stronger down here. Someone's been here recently. These markings match the chest. Need to document this before. The investigation now focused on determining whether Marcus had voluntarily entered the tunnel system or been forced there. Soil and residue analysis from the tunnel entrance revealed trace evidence consistent with at least 2 individuals having passed through around the time of the disappearance. In July 2023, the most significant breakthrough came when police identified fingerprints on the stone chest seen in Marcus's final recording. They belonged to Dr. Russell Calloway, the collector who had donated the artifacts Marcus was studying. Calloway, now 78, had been a prominent anthropologist and collector who donated extensively to museums across the West Coast. Further investigation revealed irregularities in his acquisition methods, with evidence suggesting some artifacts had been obtained through unauthorized excavations of protected indigenous sites. When confronted with the evidence, Calloway admitted to visiting the museum on November 12, 2009, though his name didn't appear in the visitor logs. I came through the service entrance. Lawrence Keller, the former director, often let me in that way when I wanted to check on my donations without making a formal visit. Calloway acknowledged encountering Marcus that afternoon. He was asking too many questions about the provenance of certain items. He had records, measurements that could have raised questions about how and where these artifacts were acquired. It would have ruined my reputation, exposed decades of my work to scrutiny. According to Calloway's testimony, he confronted Marcus in the storage room after seeing him examine the stone chest, an item Calloway claimed had been acquired under sensitive circumstances from a sacred site in the Olympic Peninsula. Ooh, I just wanted to scare him, to convince him to drop that line of research, Calloway stated. Things escalated. He refused to give me the recordings. Said the acoustic properties of the artifacts proved they had been taken from a sacred site that matched descriptions in his research. The confrontation turned physical. Calloway admitted to pushing Marcus, causing him to fall and strike his head against the corner of a storage cabinet. Believing Marcus was seriously injured or possibly dead, Calloway panicked. He decided to hide the body using the maintenance tunnel he had learned about during previous visits to the museum. I dragged him into the tunnel, Calloway confessed. He was unconscious but still breathing. I left him there, took his equipment, and sealed the entrance. I convinced myself he would wake up, find his way out through the drainage system. I told myself he would be fine. Based on the physical evidence and Calloway's testimony, investigators believe Marcus regained consciousness in the tunnel and attempted to navigate the drainage system, possibly disoriented from his head injury. Heavy rainfall that night caused flash flooding in parts of the storm drain network. The current theory is that Marcus, injured and disoriented, was swept away by the sudden rush of water. In October 2023, a comprehensive search of the drainage system was conducted, approximately 2 miles from the museum. In a section of the system that empties into the Willamette River, search teams recovered skeletal remains. DNA testing confirmed they belonged to Marcus Whitley, Dr. Russell Calloway has been charged with involuntary manslaughter, evidence tampering, and violating multiple federal laws regarding the acquisition and transportation of protected cultural artifacts. He awaits trial under house arrest due to his advanced age and health concerns. The subsequent investigation into Calloway's collection has sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. A joint task force of FBI art crime specialists and representatives from the Department of the Interior has begun a systematic review of all artifacts donated by Calloway to institutions across North America. To date, over 300 items have been identified as illegally obtained from protected sites on federal and tribal lands. The prosecution's case against Calloway has expanded beyond Marcus's death to include decades of systematic looting. Court documents reveal that Calloway maintained detailed records of his illegal excavations, disguised as legitimate field research. These journals, seized during a search of his Seattle home, contain maps, photographs, and coordinates of dozens of sacred sites that had been plundered for artifacts. This case has exposed a dark underbelly of private collecting that the museum world has too often turned a blind eye to, explains Dr. Nora Wilkins, an archaeologist specializing in repatriation of indigenous artifacts. Prestigious donors have historically been given the benefit of the doubt regarding how they acquired their collections. Marcus Whitley's research inadvertently challenged that system of privilege. The stone chest that Marcus discovered has been identified as a ceremonial resonator created by ancestors of the Quinault Nation, dating back approximately 200 years. Acoustic engineers who examined the artifact confirmed Marcus's findings. The chest produces specific frequency patterns when objects are placed inside it, potentially used in ceremonial contexts that are referenced in oral traditions but had never been physically documented before. And what Marcus discovered was evidence of sophisticated acoustic engineering that predates European contact, explains Dr. Catherine Lambright, an ethnomusicologist who has studied the chest. The specific resonance patterns he recorded match descriptions in Quinault oral histories of objects used to communicate across long distances or to mark significant celestial events. It's a groundbreaking connection between physical evidence and cultural memory. In April 2024, exactly 1 year after the discovery of the tapes, the Whitley family attended a formal repatriation ceremony where the stone chest and associated artifacts were returned to representatives of the Quinault Nation. Robert Whitley, Marcus's father, was invited to participate in the ceremony. My son was passionate about respecting the cultural context of the objects he studied, Robert Whitley told journalists afterward. He would be honored to know that his work helped return these sacred items to their rightful caretakers. That gives us some measure of peace in our loss. The drainage tunnel where Marcus's remains were found has been permanently sealed, with a small memorial plaque installed near the site. The Portland Museum of Natural History has undergone a complete overhaul of its acquisition policies and provenance verification procedures. The former storage room where Marcus conducted his final research has been converted into a laboratory dedicated to ethical archaeological practices, named in his honor. For Detective Mercer, who spent 14 years carrying the weight of the unsolved case, the resolution brings complex emotions. Cold cases like this leave scars on everyone involved. The family, the investigators, even the community, she explains during an interview for a documentary about the case. You live with the questions, the what-ifs, The sense that someone is out there waiting for answers. Finding those answers doesn't erase the years of uncertainty, but it does allow for a different kind of healing to begin. Marcus's research has had a lasting impact beyond the solving of his own disappearance. His methodology for analyzing acoustic properties of artifacts has been adopted by several university anthropology departments. A foundation established in his name provides grants to students pursuing research at the intersection of indigenous knowledge and archaeological science, with an emphasis on ethical practices and collaboration with tribal communities. Dr. Elena Vasquez, who has continued the work her student began, sees Marcus's legacy in changing attitudes within her field. Before Marcus, archaeoacoustics was considered somewhat fringe, she explains. His rigorous approach, even in the fragments we recovered from his notes and recordings, demonstrated that sound was as important to ancient cultures as visual aesthetics or structural design. He was asking questions that challenged our understanding of how ancient peoples experienced their world. In the final analysis by the medical examiner, Marcus's cause of death was determined to be drowning, complicated by blunt force trauma to the head. The 14-year delay in recovering his remains made it impossible to determine more specific details, but the evidence supported the conclusion that he had been alive when he entered the drainage system. The most difficult part to accept, Linda Whitley says in a statement released through the family's attorney, is knowing that Marcus was conscious, trying to find his way out. We take some comfort in knowing that he fought until the end, that he didn't give up. That was who he was, persistent, determined to find answers. The 7 tapes that ultimately led to solving the case remain in the police evidence archives, though digital copies have been provided to the Whitley family and to researchers continuing Marcus's work. The final tape, with its abrupt ending, serves as both evidence in a criminal case and as the last testament of a young scholar whose pursuit of knowledge cost him his life, but ultimately brought long overdue justice and recognition to the cultural heritage he sought to understand. In the end, reflects Detective Mercer, it was Marcus himself who solved his own case. He left behind the breadcrumbs we needed to follow, the tapes, the notes, the evidence of what he'd discovered. 14 years later, he finally got to tell his story.